The next type that we want to talk about is an array. In PHP, an array is an ordered map which associates a value to a specific key. So there are basically two ways to create arrays in PHP. One is through using the array construct person equals array. So this is one way to create an array in PHP. The other way will be to use the square bracket like I showed you previously. So I say persons. These are two different arrays. One is using the PHP array construct, and then the other one is using the bracket. So for using the bracket, this is actually available starting from PHP version 5.4. So if you're using PHP version 5.3, anything below 5.4, this is not going to work. Both of these are empty arrays. If we do var dump on each of them, this is an empty array, 0 elements. Same thing for persons. The array of 0 elements. So to assign value to these arrays, remember just now I said that it uses value and keys. So it's actually an ordered map of key value pairs. So let's say we want to put a value here. The name of the person is Terry. So you take note of the symbol that I'm using here, equal sign, and then the greater than sign together. So this is how we map a value to a specific key. So here, Terry is the value, and then name is the key. To add an additional element to this array, all I need to do is put a comma, and then specify the next key. This is age, and then I say 33. So this also shows you that inside an array in PHP, we can store different data types. So the first one here, Terry, is a string. The next one, age, is actually a number. So we can also even have an array within an array. So if let's say I want to specify another key as an array, so I can say likes, and then this is going to be equal to another array. So I can here put a list of the things that I like. So I say I like reading, like eating, like swimming, and the list goes on. So this is basically showing us that in an array we can store essentially anything. So what we have here now is an array that also contains an element whose children are also arrays. Okay, so this is one way that we create an array in PHP. The second way is using the square bracket, the exact same thing. So I can actually just copy all of this and then put inside the square bracket to be the exact same thing. So if we do a refresh on the page now, you can see this array contains first element, name, and the string is of length 5, and the value is Terry. Age is an integer, the value is 33. Likes is an array with 3 elements. First one is a string 7, second one is a string 6 as a length, and then the last one is also a string with 8 characters. So this is essentially two ways that we create an array in PHP. So one thing that is very important to note here that I really want to show is when accessing the values that is stored in an array, we essentially use the key. And in both of the arrays that I defined here, I'm actually using name-based keys, which is also referred to as associative arrays in PHP. So if you see here, I did not assign any key for this array, reading, eating, and swimming. So PHP automatically assigns indexes to this array. If we look at the result again, you can see here that the key is 0, here the key is 1, here the key is 2. So representing the 3 value, which is PHP use a 0-based index to assign keys to that specific array. So let's see a much clearer example. I'm going to get rid of the keys. Then I'm going to get rid of this. And then I'm just going to remove this, make it much clearer. And by the way, we can actually leave the extra comma here. It won't be treated as an error. PHP will actually ignore it. So now let's refresh. Okay, so you can see here the array has two elements. The first index is 0, always 0. So you take note, the first index of an array is actually 0. And then the value for the index of 0 is actually Terry. It's a string with 5 characters. And then the index 1 has an integer and the value is 33. So to access each of the value differently, we can then use the index. So if I'm going to say echo persons position 0. So use a square bracket to say, give me the value in position 0 of this array. So if I do a refresh, the value in position 0 is actually Terry. So I can also do the same thing, give me the value of position 1 in this array. Do a refresh, the value in position 1 is actually 33. So what happens if I say give me index of 2, give me the value of in the index position 2. It's going to give an error because we don't have index position 2. So undefined offset 2. So in the array, the index is only 0 and 1. If we add an additional element, then we can have 2. Let's say we have a floating point number 5.9. Now this error will be gone because there is now an index 2 for that array. The same thing will be true if we want to access values in associative array. So the one that we have on top here is an associative array, although it's a mix of both associative array and index-based arrays. So let's say we want to say person, which is from the top here, and we say name. So this is actually going to give Terry. Say person age. So now we are actually using the keys. So the keys here are name base. In PHP, as I've mentioned, these are called associative arrays, where we actually assign a key by ourselves, as opposed to PHP assigning an index-based key for us. Refresh 33, and then refresh. Array to string conversion. The reason why we get an error here is because like is not a string, it is an array, so I cannot use echo on like. So I can either decide to use var dump, or there is another PHP function which is called print r that I can use. Print r, this will be used to print an array, the value in an array. So let's refresh again. So you can see this gives us the value inside of that array. But what if I didn't want to do this? I still want to use the echo to just access a specific value inside of this array. So we can do something like this, likes, and then put another square bracket and say, give me the value in position 0. So value in position 0 is reading. Give me the value in position 1. Value in position 1 is eating. And then give me the value in position 2, which should be equal to swimming. Like so, we can also access the value of an array within an array. Don't forget, we can do that, or we use print r. Print r. Alright, so we'll be learning more about how to work with array later in the course. Now let's move on to the next type that we have here, which is an object. So I'm going to comment at this. Then we come over to objects. I have another series coming up, which is object-oriented programming in PHP, where you're going to learn much more about objects. An object is essentially an instance of a class. And then a class itself is a blueprint from which we create objects. So like I said, we're going to talk more about classes and objects in another series. For now, we're just going to use a simple example to show you what an object is. So I'm going to create a class here. I'll call this person. In PHP, we use the keyword class and then followed by the name that we want to assign to that class. So I call this class person. Inside this class, I'm going to have one attribute and I'm going to call this name. So let's say this is the name of the person. And then I'm just going to have two methods inside of this class. It's going to be a public function. Function set name. So this is going to be used to set a name for this person. This is going to take one parameter, which is going to be a string, the name of the person. And then I'm just going to assign whatever is entered as the name from this method to the property of this class name. So remember at the top here, I have a public name property. So to refer to this property in PHP, we use this, then we use the dash greater than sign followed by the name of the property. Now we are not using the dollar sign, we just use only the name. So I'm saying this name is equal to string. So whatever is entered through this function, I'm assigning it to this property name. Okay, so that's all that function does. I have another function, public function, get name. So what this function does is just return this name. Okay, so here we set the value of this property name to be equal to whatever is entered here. And then here we just return the value that is being set. So generally in programming, this will be referred to as getters and setters. So here we set the name and here we get the name. This is essentially a blueprint. So to create an object of this, we're going to use a new keyword in PHP. So I'm going to say person equal new and then the name of the class, new person in this case. Okay, so we can then call the methods that are available to the class set name. I'm just going to put my name here. All right, so we set the name here to Osayawe Terry, and then next we can immediately echo person get name. So when we do this, it's going to return the value that we actually set here. So this is a basic example that I can show you of an object. So an object is created in PHP using the new keyword followed by the name of the class from which we want to create this object. So essentially this object is an instance of this class. So everything that is declared inside of this class is available to this object. So let's do a refresh. And then you see the name that I defined there. Right, so the next on the list is callables. Going to do a comment on this and then come over to callables. Okay, so basically I just list this here because it's actually a part of the list in PHP documentation. Essentially, this is way beyond the scope of the series. So as I've mentioned in the upcoming series on object-oriented programming, we're going to be learning about callables and callbacks in PHP. So let's look at resources. Resources is a special variable which serves as a reference to an external resource. This external resource in most cases will be a database connection. So usually when you start building an application, you want to store the data in a database. So between the database and your application, there needs to be a link, which means you need to establish a connection to that database, and then this connection will be stored in a variable. The type of that variable is referred to as a resource. It can also be an image, any external resources, an image canvas, or a file. So let's say we're trying to get a file from somewhere else and store it in a variable. So that variable type is a resource. All right, and then the last one is none. This essentially means a variable without a value. So when we say a variable is equal to none, means it doesn't have a value. All right, so if I do this, I'm saying this variable doesn't have any value. So let's say this variable has a value of 8. And then below, I come here and say var equal to null. So we can use all uppercase or all lowercase. It's a constant that PHP provides for us. Do a var dump on var, then refresh. So it tells us that this is null. It is different from an empty string. Okay, so this is a string and it's an empty string, which is also referred to as a value. So it is different from null, which means no value. We set a variable to be equal to null, means this variable doesn't have a value. This is one way that we can destroy whatever is saved inside of a variable in PHP. That's it for data types. In the next lecture, we'll be looking at constants in PHP.